I guess we can say we're talking with one of the recognized names of animation, one of the pioneers, Leo Salkin. Leo, I guess you're best known for your work through UPA and through Disney. What's been
Yes.
your favorite piece of animation that you like, whether it's necessarily yours or not?
The whole question about animation is that it's very difficult to pick a piece of animation. It's like picking a piece of acting. It has to do with the nature of what it's doing, because animation, in a sense, like acting, has got to be looked at almost beyond the art of animation. For example, there are many things in the Disney films that are astonishing in their skill and the degree of character revelation that's in them. But also, for example, in a scene in the first Gerald McBoing Boing, where it's done with the most minimal of means, and yet the emotion it portrays is extraordinary in how affecting and touching it is. So that, for example, when the little boy is sort of kicked out of school and goes home and wants to talk to his father, he walks up the stairs, the father's shaving, the boy tugs at his father's suspenders, the father lets out a yell of annoyance, and the kid is destroyed by the reaction. So that the animation within the minimal means at its disposal was extraordinarily effective.
Some people in animation around this room have, because of their awareness of animation, I've heard a few people say, gee, that guy looks just like the real Mr. Magoo, but there's a little bit more truth to that.
I don't know what the truth is. No, the the truth about that is that Magoo was created by a number of people, evidently. John Hubley seems to have been one. There's a writer whose name eludes me at the moment. I think Bill Scott was there at the time. It turns out that Magoo and I have a striking resemblance to one another. Now, however that came about is something that goes beyond me. It may be a case of nature imitating art.
I noticed that all animators, they tend to do a lot of drawings on the side. Could it be that the first model sheets of Mr. Magoo might have been patterned after you?
It's very possible. I've heard stories to that effect. I can't verify it, but it seems a very good possibility.
Are you here to observe today, or are you part of the program?
No, I'm not part of the program. I'm president of ASIFA Hollywood this year, so part of my being here is in that capacity. And also the fact that it's just fun to be here, and it's fun to be around a bunch of people who draw and who like drawings.
You've been involved with ASIFA for so many years, since the beginning. How does it feel to be president, and what do you hope to do in this role?
I haven't been involved with ASIFA that long. It's actually been a number of years. I've been on the fringes of it for many years, including my friendship with Les Goldman, who was one of the early presidents, and some of the other people, certainly with Bill Scott. I think always the problem is to get people to recognize the potential of animation, the enormous possibilities that are always curtailed because animation is thought of largely as a children's medium. You do children's shows, and its greatest popularity currently seems to be on Saturday mornings, and that's good, but it's a pity then that animation doesn't have the opportunity, for example, to explore so many areas that it could be extremely effective in. For example, during World War II, the government turned to Disney and to what was then the forerunner of UPA, Steve Basusto and John Hubley. Bill Scott was there at the time, I believe. And they found that in terms of communicating information, in terms of training films and instructional films, that animation was a marvelously flexible medium that could communicate often very abstract ideas in a simple form that still didn't distort the basic validity of the idea, but made it more understandable.
We've asked some of the other guest celebrities to this program about their bosses. Can you tell me about some of your leaders or your bosses, or somebody who you might have been influenced by, or
well,
who's been your mentor?
Well, there has been no mentor in the sense that I think the term is generally used. At the period I grew up in the business and worked in it, I worked at Universal. I started at Universal under Walter Lantz. I then went to Disney's and I was there for about 7-8 years. I think of all the people that, well, there's so many different people that one is influenced by in different ways. Certainly Disney was the most incredible influence of anyone that I had ever worked with. In his, because I worked in story, I'd worked as an animator, but I got into story at the Disney studio, and I found that what was learned there, and often it wasn't so much that at the time you were doing it that seemed so terribly important, but only in retrospect, as one looks back.
One of my duties for Walter Lantz, Walter just sold his company to Universal, and Universal has great interest in the Walter Lantz products, one of them being the early Oswalds. We're in the process now of we're screening them all, editing them down for home video. We're going to be adding colorization to these Oswalds. How do you feel about that?
It sounds totally absurd, but I'll reserve final judgment until I see them. I think there was a certain charm and delight about the old black and white films that one ought not to lose. I mean, it would be like adding color to Chaplin. It would be like putting that damned imitation Chaplin in there to advertise Xerox. I'm appalled by those things. I think that there is an inherent integrity in the films as they were done, and I would prefer to see them that way, but it'll be fun to see what they do.
What was it like on the Universal lot when you first started?
It was it was the most exciting place that someone could work, in the sense that we were on a real motion picture lot. That sounds terribly naive and a bit idiotic, but it was exciting to be in the middle of this vast production company that was doing all these films. And so often at noon or after work, it was great fun to go over on the stages and watch them shooting. They were then shooting the original Frankenstein at that time, and they were shooting many interesting films, so that the cartoon department being on the lot was like one aspect, one phase, one facet of that total production complex. It was a neat place to work.
Do you recall any of the cartoons that you worked on, any of the storylines?
Not really. Okay. I think one of the exciting phases of having worked at Lance's at that time was having worked with Tex Avery. Because, should I go on, or you?
Yes.
Because the thing about that was, at that time, we really didn't have even a story department. so that the stories were done by a group of people sitting around, so that if Tex Avery had a sequence to do and he felt he wanted to do more gags in it, he would call a number of us that liked to do gags. I remember Cal Howard was one of them, I was one, there were a couple of others of us, and we would sit around Tex's desk and do the gags, and then Tex would jot down ideas, and ultimately that would become maybe a 300-foot sequence. But that was an interesting part of the way the studios functioned at that time, which is vastly different from the way they're working today.
Leo, so many of the animators, let's say the pioneers or people, the heads of the animation studios, last for so many years. They never seem to retire. The Tex Avery and the Bob Clampett and the Leo Salkin. Why is that?
What else could you do that's that much fun? The fact about it is that we're in a field that's essentially playful. I mean that in the very best sense of the word. That is, if you think about the inherent nature of a cartoon is a playful creation. It plays with a certain distortion of imagery. It plays with certain distortions of ideas. It plays with cartooning concepts. It's probably the most playful of all of the art forms. It almost seems inherent, indigenous to the nature of animation. I'm not ignoring the fact that animation sometimes gets into abstract areas, but I'm thinking mostly of the cartoons that so many of us have worked in.
We look forward to your guidance with the SEPA. Thank you for talking with us.
Well, you're very welcome. It's a delight to talk to you, and good luck with this entire project.